Hello, everyone, and welcome to this live reaction stream on another big day of news in Formula One. I'm Alex Shakes. I'm delighted to be joined by the senior man at F1.com and F1 TV presenter Lawrence Barretto. Lawrence, the big news this morning: Franco Colapinto is replacing Jack Doohan at Alpine. It's more big news from Alpine in the last 24 hours. What's your reaction to what we've learned this morning?
Well, yeah, it's been dramatic, Alex. I know over the last couple of days there's been some increase in speculation that Franco was going to get in the car and replace Jack. It was just uncertain at which point and when the team would announce it. Ever since Jack's really been announced as an Alpine race driver, he got his debut this year. Unfortunately for him, he's had Franco essentially stood behind him, watching his every move and put the pressure on him. And Alpine have just decided, after 6 races in the car and what they've seen from Jack, and he has yet to score points, he's had a couple of big crashes, they've decided to switch it up and to, what they say, evaluate their driver lineup and their driver pool. And they want to put Franco in and give him a run of 5 races, starting at Imola next weekend, and giving him a chance to race on 3 tracks in that triple header that he has experience of.
Has experience there from F2, and also has been testing an old Alpine around the Imola circuit earlier this year. I think the news was expected after the Sunday at the Miami Grand Prix, but it's that driver evaluation part of the press release that catches the eye. 5 races to stake your claim after the last guy got 6.
Yeah, it's a good point. I'm not sure why he hasn't got 6 too, but I guess the British Grand Prix is a home race of sorts, and it might feel like that was a natural point for them within the season to make that decision going forward. Look, Alpine have got this driver pool. They've got Franco Colapinto, they've got Jack Doohan, they've got Paul Aaron, and they have got the opportunity in this somewhat transitional year while they're trying to build the team back up ahead of the regulation change in 2026. So they've got the opportunity to do it. And I guess they can do a back-to-back test of sorts where they put Franco under a bit of pressure. Say you've got 5 races, so you're not indefinitely in the car. And then they can really kind of pressure test him to see whether or not he's got what it takes, or what they believe he's got enough to keep that seat, not maybe just till the end of the year, but into 2026 and beyond. And they will probably feel like they've given Jack a good stab at it. He obviously had his home race in Australia. He's had 6 races to try and get some momentum to build a rhythm. And there have been some high points. You know, even last time out in Miami, he out-qualified Pierre Gasly, his teammate, for the first time. He came close to scoring points in Bahrain. So I think he's shown the kind of flashes of speed that Alpine believed he had. It's just been the inconsistency. You know, it's that crash in Australia, it was the crash in Japan, and it was just generally being a little bit too far off Pierre in both qualifying and the race. So for Alpine, I guess, to put Franco in the car, he joined the team because they believed that he had the capability to be a race driver. When he left, when Williams allowed him or came to an agreement or loaned him, whatever terminology you want to use, to Alpine, they said it was to allow him to get a race seat. So I think there was always this narrative that in joining Alpine, even on the bench, he would have the opportunity at some point to get a race seat. I'm not sure he thought and Jack thought it was going to come this soon, but I think the possibility was always there. So I think Alpine, from the press release and the wording within there, are trying to be pragmatic, and they want to put Franco in the car and see what he's got. And I guess the reality is they've got this pool and they can do what they want with their drivers.
It's absolutely the case. It's reminiscent of what we've seen Red Bull do with their junior programs in the past. I want to take this subject by subject then, because I think the first headline, Lawrence, is going to be that a ton of people this morning will be thinking, how on earth is this enough time to stake your claim in Formula One as a rookie? There's a lot of people who are going to be thinking, how on earth can you perform given the circumstances that you just described? And Jack began his Formula One career with this looming over him. How do you assess his performance given the spectre of how he got his chance in Formula One?
I think he's had a really tough time of it. I think they put him in the car for the final race of the season in Abu Dhabi, replacing Esteban Ocon, because they knew he was obviously moving on to Haas. And that's really hard to just jump into a car in the final race of the season. And I actually thought he did a decent job. Didn't score, but did a decent job around Abu Dhabi. He then had a natural pre-season. But as we know, Alex, you don't get a proper amount of time in the car in testing anymore. He got, 1.5 days, and that's not really enough to kind of get up to speed within your own environment. And I think when you're going into a team like Alpine, when you've got Pierre, who is clearly the future, they extended his contract, he is the lead driver, and then you're in the other seat, and you've got to perform quickly and immediately, because you've got Franco Colapinto, who did such a great job when he was super subbed in for Logan Sargent for the final 9 races last year. When you've got Franco around, that he clearly gets on well with Flavio Briatore. That he's brought a load of sponsors to the team, and he's brought that financial backing. That's kind of like you kind of hinted at, like that spectre in the room. It must be an immense amount of pressure. And I think for Jack, he has actually done a pretty good job of trying to do his best within that very difficult environment. There's been so much noise. I don't think a weekend has passed this year where we haven't talked about the prospect of Jack being replaced. And for a young driver, that must be really tough. And then we saw, like you hinted at, Liam Lawson losing his drive at Red Bull after just 2 races after Australia and China. That must have stressed Jack out a lot more, because he can see how quickly things have changed in the reality when he's on the grid. And I think that as much as Alpine were backing him and they gave him their support, they never came out and said, Jack, you're definitely getting the seat for the full year. They never came out and kind of did that. But then equally, they didn't say, Jack, you're under pressure, you've got to deliver. It was kind of somewhere in the middle. And I know from talking to people at Alpine, there's a lot of people in that team who have a lot of time for Jack, and they were impressed with the job that he's done. They are particularly under pressure. And I think this will be a repeated topic that we'll talk about throughout the stream, that everything he had to do was under this constant pressure. And we've seen, like Yuki Tsunoda even going into Red Bull, it's really hard to build momentum and find and adjust to a team. Lewis is struggling at Ferrari. Carlos has taken some time at Williams. And Jack's doing this with no experience, or having to do that with no experience. So to your point, it's tough. Of course it is. 6 races is not a lot of time to prove that you've got what it takes. But it's so tough in Formula One these days when you've got so many drivers who are capable of being on the grid. And I think for Alpine and for Jack, this is just the scenario that they find themselves in. Alpine are 9th in the Constructors' Championship at the minute. They're not really fighting for anything beyond top of the midfield. It's not like a driver change like this is going to destabilise the team too dramatically. So it kind of makes sense to do it early on. And if they are just giving Franco 5 races, that should suggest that Jack, in theory, has the opportunity to come back. So he's back in the reserve role, and that's going to be tough to take. But it's not all over yet. They could have said, no, Franco, you in indefinitely, and they haven't said that yet. Whether or not, I don't know, behind the scenes, decisions have been made. The reality is, on paper, he has got a chance to come back.
Worth saying and repeating that Alpine have scored points in Formula One on 1 occasion so far this year in the Grand Prix format. In that Bahrain Grand Prix, Pierre Gasly scoring a really strong 7th place, having started 4th on the grid. Jack Doohan running in the points for a long time in that Grand Prix, just the timing of how things worked out at the end going against him, given the strategy that he was on. I will say personally, I think the way he has acquitted himself with the media and in the paddock has been a credit to him and his family, because you're talking about a young elite athlete getting his chance, but knowing that he was having to perform just absolutely instantly at a level that was always going to be a tall task for the guy. And Lawrence, I think the professionalism has meant that it's not a immediate exit door, and that he remains part of the fold, because he's been a pro throughout this. And only in Miami with SQ1 did we see the first hints that he was feeling that pressure with that team radio message.
And you could argue that it was fair enough because of the pressure that had been building up until that point. And he knew what was at stake at that point, which is probably why there was so much in that radio message where he got so frustrated, and he couldn't almost stop it, and he needed to let it out. I think when I've talked to him in the TV pen, when we've interacted with him generally across, F1 TV and in a wider picture across with all broadcasters, I think it is that respect that has been super impressive. Obviously, his father, Mick, an absolute legend, very well respected within motorsport. He's clearly been brought up in a great family, like you suggested. And I think sometimes we've seen other drivers haven't been able to kind of keep their counsel as well as Jack has done.
Yeah.
And I think within the press release, he talks about still having his personal goals. And I think that he waited so long for this opportunity to get a race seat. He got it, and he's obviously not ready to go. And even though he potentially saw the writing was on the wall, he wasn't willing to just throw it all away to have that snap moment or throw his toys at the pram because he wants it so badly. So I think it's another example of just how much it means to him to be racing in Formula One, and the work that he's put in to this point. So I think he'll keep his head down over the next next 5 races. I imagine he'll be in the simulator a lot. I think he'll do the job that he did up until he became a race driver. He will do everything that he can to really help the team. It'll be much harder this time because he knows that he had it and he's had it taken away. But we've seen with Ricciardo very recently that if you do a good job and you impress the team and you are respectful, you can get another opportunity. And I'm not saying that there will be plenty of doors open elsewhere if it doesn't happen at Alpine. But I think that in Formula One, as we've seen with Lawson losing his seat and now with Doohan, who knows what's going to happen anywhere on the grid. And if Jack's got Formula One experience now, he did a ton of testing for Alpine in the junior program. And there aren't that many drivers on the grid, within the immediate sphere who have got that kind of experience. So he knows he's kind of there and he's in the mix. And I think he's done a great job of just being really pragmatic about his situation at the minute.
I think that's well summarized. Franco Colapinto then, with a golden opportunity. We knew the moment that they announced him to a multiple-year reserve driver deal, this chance was going to come. That just does not happen I can't think of a reserve driver deal with multiple years attached in any other year that I've watched Formula One. I've been watching since 1998. So we knew he was going to get his chance. You hinted at it earlier on that it's come sooner rather than later, but let's be honest, he was always getting a go in the Alpine at some point in 2025, was the assumption when we knew that he got that reserve driver role for a couple of years.
Yeah, I think the job that he did at Williams was so impressive in that really early phase when he scored points, early doors in Baku, that Williams moved to lock him down, because even though they had Alex Albon and Carlos Sainz inbound from Ferrari, they felt like there was a lot of potential there. They felt like he was a very strong package, from driving talent to the support he and the massive fan base that he brings from Argentina to the financial backing. It made sense. Now, obviously, over that period of those 9 races, there were some bumps along the way. I think he had 3 quite big crashes, moved up the damage bill significantly for the team. But I think at that point, Williams locked him down. So the only way that he was going to leave that team and that family was if he had the opportunity to get a race seat sooner than he would have done at Williams. And with, Alex doing such a great job and Carlos coming in and obviously the future of that team, at least in the short to medium term, he probably knew his opportunities at Williams were limited. So when Alpine came knocking, and he would have known the pressure that Jack was under, he would have known the way that the team and Flavio have talked to him about the potential opportunities in the future, he would have come there knowing that he would get a chance at some point. Like you said, it has come sooner than expected, but this was always the plan. Team Colapinto wanted to get in the car as soon as possible, and it was really tough for Franco to lose his seat at the end of last year because of the job that he felt he did, and fair play to him. I think he hit the ground running. He was super impressive, both in the car and out of the car, the way, handled himself in the media, how he showed so much personality. how he was so exuberant out on track that, you know, even though there were those down points and those crashes and those frustrations, there were those great peak performances that I think at a time when so many rookies were coming in, it really put Franco on the map. So I think for him, he wanted to get in the car as soon as possible. You talked about him doing a test earlier this year at Imola. So the team, he knew by coming to Alpine, one of the few junior programs really that gives you a lot of mileage in a Formula One car. So at bare minimum, he knew he'd get a lot of time to kind of keep the dust off, keep the rust off rather, and kind of keep himself racing sharp if he would get the opportunity. But he would have been pushing Flavio Briatore hard every single race weekend on phone calls during the week. He would be asking to get in the car. And I think so long as he did a good job behind the scenes, and so long as he remained respectful behind the scenes, he knew his chance would come. And he's got it. And he will come in, I think, with the confidence of believing that he can hit the ground running just because of what he did at Williams last year. And I think he will also take a lot of confidence from the fact that, yes, Alpine have only scored points in that one Grand Prix in Bahrain, but they've shown that they've got the potential to compete. And I think he'll back himself to do that. And in a very, very tight midfield, I think he'll feel like he can make the difference. So he'll head out now to 5 circuits, well, 4 of the 5 circuits he's going to, so Imola, Monaco, Spain, and then skipping Canada into Austria. He knows from F2, Canada will be a new one, but he'll have had 3 races in the car then to get comfortable to everything you need to, from the processes, the system checks, that kind of thing, the feels and the buttons on the steering wheel. He'll have got used to all of that by then. And I think he'll generally just believe that he'll do a good enough job to convince Alpine that he's their future, that he should stay in the car.
He's got that opportunity. As you say, the dress rehearsal from last year, he's used to being dropped in mid-season and performing immediately. I think the key thing for him, if you look at the context of drivers that have out-qualified Alex Albon in the last 55 races of Alex Albon's Formula One career, Franco Colapinto and Carlos Sainz, and that's it. And I think the fact that we know how quick Alex is, and he's proving it again at the most recent Grand Prix, consistent point-scoring finishes. Franco Colapinto was always going to find his way back onto a grid. Seems extraordinary that he was linked with that Red Bull seat. I wonder if he's got a bit of a sigh of relief that he didn't end up in a seat that lasted for 2 races for Liam Lawson, and he gets his opportunity just a few races later. This is all in the context, Lawrence, of extraordinary turnover at the Group Renault Alpine team. Last 5 years have seen an incredible number of people at the helm of the team. They have turned over their technical leadership more than once. And last night, another announcement, exactly 12 hours before we got the Franco Colapinto news that he's been promoted to the race seat. Oli Oakes leaving the team with immediate effect. And that was a surprise. We potentially, after Sunday, expected this driver swap, but we didn't expect Oli Oakes to be leaving.
No, this is a massive shot, Alex, like you hinted at. I think when Oli came in, I remember Flavio and Oli did a press conference in Zandvoort last year, the first opportunity, really, the media got to talk to them. And Flavio was like, you know, I interviewed a few people, but Oli stood out as a clear candidate for this role. He felt like he'd done an impressive job with high tech in junior formula. They clearly got on very well. They kind of seemed to dovetail pretty well. And so then he went on to lead the team to P6 in the constructors. Yeah, a bit of fortune with that incredible weekend in Brazil where Esteban and Pierre got the double podium. But nonetheless, he led the team to an extraordinary finish after a very difficult start to the season, where I think they lined up on the back row in Bahrain. So then we came into this season. It felt like there was a lot of stability within the operation. It felt like they were going to use this as a transitional year to really build something. Oli, I remember talking to him about the projects that he was kind of working on to improve things at Enstone. He brought in Dave Greenwood as racing director. It felt like Alpine had kind of recovered from what you talked about there, Alex, about the number of changes. You know, Otmar Safnauer, Bruno Famin had gone, Alan Permain, Pat Fry, Matt Harmon, Dirk de Beer, Davide Brivio, all of these people had gone within the last couple of years. It felt like
I thought the stream was just going to be you listing people that had left Alpine for a while. There's just that's all the time we've got left. Lawrence has named literally everyone who's ever worked for the team, but it does speak to the very unusual situation. You do look; it's a performance-based business, isn't it? Formula One, but the amount of turnover that you were listing before I so rudely interrupted. Is unprecedented compared to the other Formula One teams in the last 5 years.
It's like nothing I've seen in the whole time that I've worked in Formula One. And honestly, if we would sat down together, Alex, and go back through the history books, I'm sure we'd be going back decades to see this kind of turnover. But you know what? Flavio Briatore came back. He's executive advisor. He's had a lot of success with the team in previous iterations at Benetton and Renault, won world championships. He's come in with a very clear view of how to turn this team around. And Renault Group boss Luca De Meo handpicked Flavio to change things up. He wasn't happy with, the performance of the team and what they've been able to achieve since they rebranded as Alpine. And so I guess in some ways, if Flavio's been given that mandate to go and deliver, and he's proved in the past that he's capable of doing it, I guess maybe we shouldn't be too surprised that this has happened. Maybe the speed at which it's happened, but I think that Flavio will back himself. He's taken on in the short term the duties of Oli from a day-to-day perspective. From what I've heard, he's made so many changes. He's come in and he's kind of seen very clearly what needs to change and cracked on with those changes, Flavio that is. And so I think he will just, he won't be perturbed by this. He'll just crack on and get on with it. And he's a proper racer. He's been in motorsport for a long time after a recent hiatus. And so I suppose at least there is some sort of leadership there. It's not like they've been left rudderless and got no one there with Oli resigning. But I think there is a hole there that will need to be filled. Oli ran the team on a day-to-day basis. He was an Enstone every day. He lived very close to the factory. He was very visible to the team. He kind of was a very good line manager. Wanted to be around. Wanted to talk, know what's going on in every department. Wanted to talk to a lot of the staff. So I think there will be that kind of hole that they'll need to fill.
Yeah. Once again. Usually this all transpires over the weekend of the Belgian Grand Prix, but this year we've brought it forward with the merry-go-round of the day-to-day person, Oli Oakes, formerly of High Tech in Formula 2, getting his promotion to Formula 1. The relationship between the two of them likened to Christian Horner and Helmut Marko, but it's not even made it to 300 days as we react to the news that Franco Colapinto has been promoted to the race seat and Oliver Oakes has left his role at the Alpine team. So with all of that summarized and the fact that Flavio Briatore, first in the Formula One paddock, Lawrence, in 1988, his third stint with the team, incredible iterations and eras with the Enstone-based team, known by different names through the years, known by Benetton and Renault and now Alpine. Where does it leave the men and women of Alpine at Enstone in 2025? There's already talk of transitional years. We've just completed round 6 of the Formula One World Championship. We're going all the way to December, and they're already talking transitional years, potentially looking at 2026 already.
Alpine are in an interesting spot at the moment. They would have known that big changes were coming, obviously bringing on the Mercedes power unit from next year, losing the Renault power unit deal, the works deal that they've had, obviously since its beginning. So they knew that it was going to be a difficult campaign. They've seen the midfield so incredibly close. They've seen teams like Williams make such a big step, Racing Bulls start the season so strongly. But I think they will probably take some hope from the fact that 2026 offers so much opportunities and the kind of reset that we've seen with other big regulation changes in the past. You've got David Sanchez, who's headed up the technical team, and that is one area within the operation that actually has been very stable. And I think there's some real positives there. Anyone that I've talked to within that technical team and in the wider business really is super impressed with what David's done. And I think they've seen already immediate impact in the development of the car currently, you know, towards the back end of last year and into this year. But they're already very excited about the project in 2026. So, and especially with the fact that Mercedes power unit is widely believed to probably likely be the best power unit for the new regulation set, you know, when we're moving to 100% sustainable fuels to a greater reliance on battery power. So I think there are a lot of positives. I think what the difficulty is that every time you have a change in leadership, particularly senior leadership like Oli in the team principal role, of course it's destabilizing. That would happen in not just a Formula One team, but any business really, in any walk of life. And so I think it will take a bit of adjustment. You've obviously got the driver change as well. So that's something else that they'll need to be working on. But I guess there's still, 18 races to go. There's a lot of the year left. And they will hope that that is long enough for them to react to these latest changes and for them not to be hurt in the build up to 2026, because they will know that there are teams like Williams who are going to make probably big steps in 26. Aston Martin with Adrian Newey are probably going to make a step as well. They can't afford to lose this opportunity. They've seen the big decisions that Luca De Meo is not afraid to make. You know, he wants to win and he wants to win quick. And he's made all of these changes. He's brought Flavio Briatore in. He's got rid of senior management in the past because he wants the team to be successful, and he will not be willing to hang around with the same kind of iteration of team if they go to 26 and they don't deliver. So that he's expecting big results. So I think there's a lot of positives to take, but there are obviously negatives that come with the change. And I think so long as Franco hits the ground running, or they find a pathway with the drivers where, you know, whether or not that's Jack returning or whatever, and Flavio finds a scenario where maybe that streamlines things without Oli having there, and he finds the appropriate position or promotes someone else internally to kind of cover some day-to-day duties, and that adds efficiency. Maybe it kind of will work out for the best, and this very early action actually is a good thing, or it could go the other way, and it's just another step in a step towards further destabilization. But I do feel like we've seen enough in the last 10 months, 11 months or so, to believe that like below the upper echelons of the team, there is some real stability forming. I think there's some real like bonds forming within within areas within Enstone. And I think that's something that maybe the team hadn't had. So hopefully those bonds remain strong. Hopefully the team, you know, who are doing the day-to-day running, they're doing the graft. Hopefully that can continue. And it isn't too destabilizing for the team, because I think it's great that Alpine are in the mix in the midfield, that they're in that position. And it's great to have Formula One in a spot where there is no bad team. And I really hope that what has happened here doesn't force them back towards the back of the field where they were at the start of last year.
Yeah, they're 1 point ahead of Sauber in the Constructors' Championship. Sauber morphing into Audi. I think when you listed all of the teams and their prospects, it shows how important that the new team principal appointment is going to be, because that's going to have to be someone who works with Flavio Briatore and can keep hold of that role for one opportunity. You mentioned the strength of the design office. I think many in the Formula One paddock would agree with the strength in the design office, but directions can change. And if there's someone different in the main office every single time, that is just, it's turmoil, and it's not handy for the overall direction. But the underlying fact is that is a former championship winning team. They do have a proven Grand Prix winner with Pierre Gasly, and now they have Franco Colapinto in the car on the day that they start the search for a new team principal as well. 5 races for Franco Colapinto. We could potentially be back on one of these reaction streams. It is a car that's qualified 4th on the grid, Lawrence. So there are still going to be other names interested in it as well. I want to thank you for your reaction. Up bright and early, Lawrence Barretto, to give us all of the details that we have at this time. The next Grand Prix, it will be Franco Colapinto and Pierre Gasly in the Alpine. It will be the return en masse and an amazing atmosphere to go with the Argentine fans, who will be back at Formula One circuit supporting Franco Colapinto. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to leave it there. Remember, you can go to f1.com for any further breaking news regarding Alpine, and we'll speak to you soon. Goodbye for now.